Hello, and welcome to We Turned Out Okay. This is the show where we are always helping you walk your true path and not the one that somebody else told you ought to be on. And I am so excited. I'm Karen Locke Culp, by the way. Sometimes I'm called Kay. And I believe I will be called Kay in this conversation with my friend Shane Trotter, who has written an incredible book. I'm holding it up. It's called Setting the Bar. You can see all my all my like foldings and note takings and stuff like that in it. Um, it's a book about human development. It's a book about how to right the wrongs that we are doing to our kids, a lot of us, unwittingly, but we're still doing it nonetheless. And Shane can be found at trottershane.com. Or if you want to check out the blog that he does with his best friend, sign up for the newsletter, you can go to inspiredhumandevelopment.com, which I think is such a great name. And we talked about that a little bit before. But so welcome, Shane. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Good to be here, Kay. Thank you.
It's very, very good to have this conversation. And I feel like it's a real long time coming. I am so excited too, because just before we hit record, we got to talking about some deep stuff. And everybody listening, Shane basically said, sure, let's start with that. When I asked.
Yeah.
So we got to talking about uh, how the things, the huge challenges that have come up in our lives have shaped us, not just negatively. I mean, like I was saying, and longtime listeners will know that there would not be We Turned Out Okay, except that well, there would not be We Turned Out Okay without my tendon disorder, where I get scar tissue with the tendons, and that has pretty serious negative repercussions on a daily basis, but it also has incredible positive ones. The other thing that has shaped me is I was sexually abused as a 7-year-old. There's a part of I wrote a book called Positive Discipline Ninja Tactics, and there is a whole chapter of that book that deals with that. I've definitely talked about it on the podcast, and probably what I should do is like have some sort of episode notes so that people can go back and listen. But maybe this will be that episode notes. Not that I want to spend my time always talking about that today, but Shane, you shared that something serious came up in your life, and I would love for you to kind of talk about that and help listeners understand like the not just the negatives but also the positives of it if you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was what is called pure OCD, which is as I was saying, it was important for me early on to you feel just when you're going through some sort of mental disorder, constant anxiety. It was a sense of constant anxiety and constantly needing to obsess. So it became it's very hard to explain. I use an example in the book to explain it, which is that you're driving along the road, going 70 miles per hour down the interstate, and we all get these weird phantom thoughts all the time. You get the thought, wow, if I turn my wheel really hard right now, the car would flip and I'd go, sailing to my death. And so we all get these thoughts. You might not even be aware that you get these thoughts because you don't feed them. You let them go. That you don't pay them any lip service. But for me, it was the mere fact that there was this anxiety disorder, and I knew that it was present. That alone made me kind of think, wow, now I have to stand guard because I'm not stable. So the second that thought came in, it became this thing that I had to fight, and I had to fight away. So of course, fight or flight system is going insane, basically, is what creates the anxiety disorder. And so there was one specific occasion where I had to pull off the side of the road, found a rest stop, and basically calm myself down because I was so afraid that I was going to lose control, and there would be a momentary impulse that ended everything, right? So that is, that's been called the imp of the perverse, named after an Edgar Allan Poe. It's a very common human trait, but for where most people, the thought would come and it would go. For me, because I fought it with such vigor, it would, you know, emotions take a lot of energy to maintain, and I fueled the heck out of my emotions. So all sorts of things. I remember getting on planes and being afraid that if I didn't, you know, pray the plane up, it would fall out of the sky. Just all sorts of. I mean, I was wrecked with pretty constant anxiety for a few years. And that was the most important thing, at least developmentally, that ever happened to me. The way I worked out, I discovered so much. It created so many passions in me, and just has shaped my entire life since then in a very positive way. So,
how old were you when you started to feel those symptoms?
it was age 19. So I remember an exam I was taking in college where I just, it was a feeling at first, and then it morphed and it kind of took on its own, it kind of like the Hydra. Every time I cut off a head, it grew two back. And so, yeah, it really, the more I fought it, the more it grew. And it's at first, what I was sharing with you previously, at first you know, you feel like you're going crazy and like you're the only person in the world that's ever dealt with something like this. You know, what is this that I'm fighting? And it makes no sense to the layman. You don't know how to explain it to anyone. You really feel alone and isolated. And this is, the beginning of Google, a few years into Google. So I'm Googling like mad, trying to figure out things. And eventually I found that, oh, this is a form of OCD that they call Pure O. And that became really, really wonderful, because all of a sudden you're not alone. There's all these people out there. But what I had to discover in the long run was even that was kind of a crutch, because you can kind of get it can be almost a point of pride to have your thing. And you had to let that go too. And what I learned is that Pure O is, it's another form of anxiety. It's an anxiety disorder. So really I had to get to the root of what is an anxiety disorder. How is it caused? What are the, exposure therapy and meditation were the two things that combined really helped me out. Exposure therapy being, basically you got to face your fears. And stop fighting or fleeing them, and welcome them in, and give them free reign.
It really comes back to like, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see this. But if we don't see it, we can't process it. We can't name it. Janine Howe,
Yes.
the frequent guest on my show, and also a good friend of mine. I believe actually it was Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, who first said this. But you got to name it to tame it, is what she says.
Absolutely.
And it's so, one thing that I love about recording interviews like this is I never know where it's going. And to me, this is a form of, there is a playfulness to the way that that you have approached this. Play is not always fun. You know what I mean? There's a lot that could play. I've come to think of it more as being in the present. Tapping into intuition, whether we know it or not, going with our gut, feeling how we feel. And it sounds to me like there's been a lot of that in your, I hesitate to call it a recovery. I don't know. How do you think of it? Like, how do you think of sort of this, the post discovery of your OCD? Do you think of it as a journey? Do you think of it as a sort of like, it's fixed, quote unquote, or how do you view that journey?
Gosh, that's a funny question. I haven't thought of that really. I guess it's, my life philosophy is kind of rooted in, my summum bonum is rooted in kind of the idea of self-actualization. So I think of it in terms of amor fati. If you're familiar, the Latin proverb, just that whatever happens is what needed to happen. You love fate, and it was what you needed at the moment to get you to the next step. So I don't know that I think of it as a recovery. I just kind of think of it as what I needed to become who I needed to become.
Yeah, and that's amazing to me. So I can't say that I love fate. I'm a person who has had to learn the things that have come up for me have taught me to give up control, and that is, to embrace that. Um,
Yeah.
that's all it's, to me, everything comes back to play, but again, not necessarily like the kind of play that you imagined as a child. It's more like the feelings that arise and the way that you react. It's happening in the present. It's almost there's almost an improv aspect to it. Like, well, here we are.
Sure. It's flow. It's flow. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you familiar with improv, and kind of how they train? I've always found it fascinating and thought it should be required in our school system because I think there's so much you can learn, from like the yes and drills.
I would say that I've become familiar with it over the years. Like, I mean, starting with like one of my favorite shows when I was younger was Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. No, not Wait, Wait, that's a good one too. And but that's not the show I'm thinking of. It's Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yes,
Um,
loved it.
it's just such a great show. And we've actually, my husband and I, just prior to the pandemic at the end of 2019, he and I got to go and see Colin Mockery. And
He was my favorite.
I know,
Colin was my favorite.
still, at least prior to the pandemic, Colin Mockery and Brad Sherwood have this show that they've been doing for decades, I believe, where they take Whose Line Is It Anyway on the road. And they did like a 2-hour, really intense, amazing. It was 100% improvised. It was just like the show. They had props. They brought people on stage. They made up songs. They made up an entire like criminal situation, which was hilarious. Like, so I've always loved improv from a comedy perspective. I would say it's probably in the last 6 months I have a friend and a colleague whose work is, her coaching is done basically around improv. She comes from the acting world.
Oh, cool.
And in fact, somebody that I coach, he has said that, like, in his adult life, one of his favorite, maybe the favorite outside of, and you said this before we recorded too, like, the OCD was an important shaper, but so were, your wife and your children and like those life events, right? So he would say, and has in fact said, like, well, I've got this incredible family. The other time in my life that was amazing was when I was an improv comedy actor, and there's a trust there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a trust among the people in the troupe. There's a trust that they're gonna yes and you right back.
Yeah. Vulnerability is required.
Yes. Yeah. And that makes me wonder if you've seen that, because I mean, you referenced not being alone anymore. And I mean, when I started in the podcasting world, I've mentioned Janine Halloran before. She was someone who I read an article that she wrote about play in a little parent paper, a newspaper that was published at the time here in Massachusetts. And I wrote to her and I was like, hey, do you want to come on my new show? And she was so generous. Absolutely. She wrote, yes, please. And that sense of not being alone is so, I think it's critical, right?
Oh, alone is the word that I just wrote it down as you said it, because it's, and I get to this a good bit in the book. It's the feelings of isolation that are created in modernity. And I completely agree with you. Play would be the answer. Adult play would be the answer. So many social problems could be worked out if we were all, playing capture the flag with our adult comrades every evening. I mean, it's hard, I think, for people of diverse backgrounds to meet and find common ground, and to trust each other when they're not entangled in activities, when they don't have common purposes. And so, yes, there's this need for connection that is going unmet broadly. that we just have to find outlets for. If you look at what where did we see progress? Well, we see progress in the 1960s racially, because we're coming out of an era where there were soldiers who were, there were mixed races of soldiers that, because of World War II, then Korea, then Vietnam. So, when you put people in situations where they're working together on common purposes, that bridges those gaps, that kind of fixes bigotries, that kind of opens their eyes to the humanity in everybody. And so, yeah, I think there is chapter 5. I go into this a lot. There's this isolation that is common in the modern world. Often we're finding tribes, but not in the healthy sense. We're finding tribes online. There's not real connection coming from it, and we're really starved for I give the example of Rat Park. And where can I go into that? Feel like that's okay. Yeah, so Rat Park is you need to go further back. For years, we thought that that drugs were, basically, cocaine, heroin, whatever it is. They're these things you try, you're addicted, full stop. That's the end of the story.
Yeah.
And that's what all the research showed. You take a rat, you put it in a cage, and the rat would you'd offer it water with some sort of drug solution, and it would hit the drug solution, and it would OD every time.
It would stop. It would just do it and do it and do it until it died.
Yep. But what Dr. Bruce Alexander in the 80s, I think it was, maybe late 70s, he says, well, look, these rats are a social species just like us humans. And we've kept these rats in cages all day, and then we've put them in a Skinner box for the test. Like, they're isolated. They're depressed rats. Let's try a different context. So he takes his rats, he takes a bunch of rats, and he creates a rat haven, an environment built around the rat needs. Excuse me. And he lets them acclimate. Babies are made, all the good stuff, right? They play, they run, and then he puts them through the exact same battery of tests. Water, morphine, heroin solution, whatever it is, and no rats overdose. The rats almost every rat tries both, and never goes back to the drug solution. He basically is showing that when in a fulfilling environment, people don't feel the need to be drugged into oblivion.
Yeah.
And so I think we're in, this is something a case I make to educators a lot. I've given this talk a couple times, but we're in a situation where we need to create Rat Park. We can create our own environment, and we need to understand the human needs and build our environment to fulfill them, rather than building our environment, towards superficial ends.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much of it gets back into I've been thinking a lot on the kind of inhumanity of, for example, corporations, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
health insurance companies or healthcare companies,
Yeah, gosh.
hands are utterly tied. So one example that has come up for us recently is we've recently switched healthcare companies. And it's not just a question of switching from one to another and things are exactly the same. Like this, it works totally differently. And having spent 25 years or something in one kind, to learn a new kind has been stressful, and one of the things, it has happened that at a physical, one of my kids had blood drawn by the the doctor's office, and a couple weeks later we got a $1,000 $1,200 bill for this blood test, and we were like, and so I call, and I'm completely stressed out, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And the poor woman on the phone, whose job it is to talk to people like me every minute of her 8, 10
Yeah.
a day, is to basically say like, here's the good news. You only have to pay $200 of that because, because that's, and had we basically said, oh, don't take this blood sample that you're about to take. We're going to go to some other place where it will cost only $30 instead of
Sure.
$40 for us. And she sort of had to, we're having this conversation and she was very helpful and very nice. And I was like, are you serious with this? Like, is this
Yeah.
true? This is how this works? And she's like, yep. Isn't that great that you don't have to pay $1,000 that you only have? And I just was like, it's a clearly, this is something she's been well trained on. And yet, like, there's this meta message of it's just total BS.
Oh,
And we've got to have this human to human interaction, which is empty of, neither one of us can say what we're really thinking. I mean, there's just so much,
yeah. It's artificial.
very, very artificial. And
it's extortion, right? Like, when you charge me $100 for an Advil tablet, like, what are we doing?
because of the way that like we have to bill it all or whatever. You won't actually pay $100 for this Advil tablet, but we have to bill it that way. And it's just so like we've created these systems that are insane. And
Mhm.
and our humanity can feel very stripped away. We can feel so alone. If we, I mean, thank goodness we have the resources to pay something like that, right? Like,
Mhm.
I could go into it at least knowing that whatever the outcome here is, we're going to be okay. And you like it sets everything up on such a negative, vicious cycle of you're always on the defense. You know what I mean? Like I've been recently doing something called an energy audit, where I don't think I have it. It's right here, but it's going to take me some time to go through it. But it's basically a page. So like, you take a piece of paper, you divide it in half. Over here, you write the energizers, the things that energize you. And over here, you write the drains, the things that drain you of energy. And one of the things that I wrote that was an energy drain was the words, your call is important to us.
Mm. Yeah.
Message, I mean, it's soul draining,
Sure. Sure.
And the idea is that what you try to do is move away from the drains and try to live more into the energizers. And that has really had just that idea. And you come back and check it once a week. Like, how am I doing with the, the energizers and leaving the drains? Like, am I living more into the energizers? And it's been life changing for me. And it's such a simple tool. It's been life changing because I've realized that almost every energizer is a doing sort of thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Almost an improv game. It's being present. It's at the park. It's drawing. It's hiking. It's being with friends. It's sitting. I went solo camping a couple weeks ago, and I've never ever done that before.
So cool.
I'm uncomfortable, or have been uncomfortable, going out for lunch by myself, like to have a whole weekend of my own thoughts and
Yeah.
what am I going to do all weekend? I came out of it with the conclusion that next time I want it to be longer, because setting up and then back down, and that I want to bring less stuff, because basically I packed for like an apocalyptic survival.
Sure.
And it was just me, and I hardly used any of that stuff anyway.
Yeah.
But it was such an energizer to be doing, you know what I mean? It's such, and
Yeah.
almost all the energy drains, I still can't believe this, are thoughts, are like negative thoughts. So your call is important to us, for me, just represented the whole monolith of corporate awfulness and bureaucracy, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And knowing that, I can recognize, there are times where I must interact with the drains. But here's the
Corporate overlords.
word interact immediately takes me, even if I was not having a pleasant experience, I was talking to a real person. I was doing things. And so there's a difference between that and just worrying about what's going to happen when I call or whatever. And it's really put me in motion. It's helped me realize that action is where I I'm happiest,
Hmm.
and
Absolutely.
interaction as well.
Yes. Yes, and it's where you create experiences that change you, where you feel yourself growing and becoming something more. That now I've camped and I can do this now, and it's a springboard to future action. You are expanding yourself when you act.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I think I'll butcher the quote, but I think Nietzsche said something to the effect of happiness is the feeling of your own power expanding.
Mhm.
Um,
I love.
which I think happens in play constantly. When I watch my kids, it's like that's what they're constantly doing. They're constantly looking to expand their power. They want to see that they can move this here and do this, and I can climb this now. It's so neat. I mean, their entire world is about self-expansion. Um,
Yeah. Can you tell me more about that? How old are they? What are their developmental? What are they doing these days?
oh, gosh, it's funny. You can't put your kids into words. They are just, you can see my smile.
Yeah.
They light you up. But so Brixie is 3. She's my baby girl, and it is a special relationship, a daddy and a daughter. I would have had no idea, but I couldn't fight it. It's different for whatever reason. And Ace is 4.5. So yeah, so Ace is gonna be he'll be 5 in March, and Brixie just turned 3.
Wow. I mean, such special ages, such fun ages.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
as you say, I can totally see it. Your whole body language and your whole face just lights up, and in your voice too. There's just such a warmth and a
Y-
fun.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's fun. We have it's there are. I've thought about this a lot as I've gotten older. My generation. I'm a millennial. I'm 32, and there is I'm kind of an old soul, I guess, playful old soul, but um there is I think some trepidation about marriage and kids amongst my generation, and I've just there's so many parts of me that unlocked when I became a parent. There are so many parts of me that unlocked when I got married, um that I could have never known I had access to, that I just a depth of living that I did not know existed otherwise, that it's just I'd like to put in words better, and maybe I'll try at some point. I can't do it off the cuff for sure, but there's really I hope that more people in my generation take the leap, because I think that is a really special thing, and it's it's one of those traditions I think that really has a lot of merit in society. I've had friends who said they look at the tribal, they're like, well, being married to one person for your entire life is not natural. I don't know if it's natural or not. It's the best dang thing I've ever decided to do. So I believe in it.
If we were already recording or if this was before, but I told you earlier this morning that when I first shook my husband's hand, I knew. I knew immediately.
Yeah.
Now 26 years ago. I was like, "Oh wow, here's a special person." I went home. In fact, I really pissed off my mother because that weekend I was supposed to be, well, not supposed to be, but I had already said I'm going to go to this graduation party that a friend of mine was having. And my mom was like, "Oh, no, because we're going to go up for your grandfather's 80th birthday to Montreal, which is where that's where I was born, that's where I'm from."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Well, actually, I mean, I've already RSVP'd. I'm going to go to this. This means a lot to me." And my mother was mad.
Hmm.
I mean, understandably, like
Sure.
family, right? And
Yeah.
ordinarily I would have been thrilled to go, but this time I was like, I'm already doing this thing. So I get home and I call my mom and she says, "Well, how was your weekend?" And I said, "I met the man I'm going to marry."
Uh-huh.
Immediately that this would, and I'd kissed a lot of frogs at that point. I just, there's something special about that person, and
Yeah.
whether I we are both very sure, and we've been 24 years married now, so like there's been a lot of trials, I guess. um,
Hmm.
we are both 100% sure that like this is it until into the afterlife. I mean, really.
Sure.
And I recognize that for some people that's not how it goes, and I think that's okay. But like you say, Shane, like I wouldn't be the person I am without my husband, and I wouldn't be the person I am without my kids. And actually, I wanted to ask you, what's a lesson that either kid or both kids, have taught you? What's something that you've learned from your kids?
Well, patience is, I mean, that's not a specific lesson, but that's the virtue that I'm reminded of constantly. It is, they will try your patience at times.
Yeah.
Um, the thing that jumps out, there's so many. The thing that jumps out is just uh the power of touch, the power of being present,
Mhm.
the power. So a couple things. My kiddos need me to hold them. It's not it, they need that. And it's really neat, and you feel it, and you can feel your body change and feel the emotions change in them. But it's not, they are different after they've been held.
Mhm.
It is a need that has to be satisfied before they can be okay to go on to other things. Um, so that's been really interesting. There's been times where early on I was a little too behavioristic. Like it's like, all right, well you did this, then this, I don't know if you're familiar with behaviorism, but it's like no. You got to take into account the whole thing, and it's like he might seem whiny right now. He might seem needy right now. Well, like meet this need, and then it all falls into place.
Yeah, because there is this I believe very wrong-headed idea that you know you let them settle themselves down for sleep. You never hug them or touch them.
Oh,
They're supposed to be independent, and the way that you build that independence is you give them what they need. And I
yes.
mean, there will come a time when one of my best friends had a family bed for years.
Uh-huh.
And they did that because they they loved it, but they also thought it would be best for the kids. And I mean, each kid got to a certain age, maybe it was 6, 5,
Hmm.
7, something like that, where they were like, all right, I want that room over there. Can that be my room now? Like it
Sure.
lasts forever, but I feel like especially those of us who do take on all the responsibility, and I 100% include myself in here. Um, we telescope out, we worry about what the outcome of this is going to be if we do this thing wrong right now, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
but our instincts are all screaming, just hug the baby and just hug
Yeah.
the child. That's what they need, you know what I mean? Sometimes that's what we need.
Yes, absolutely. And there's early in my life, I had a tendency to be too logic driven. My dad is a philosophy, doctoral philosophy professor. So I kind of had that in my. So there's a lot of just overly analytical things, but there's so much you can't explain that it's just special. Um, the past 4 years, I've woken up at 4 every morning because I needed to write my book, and with kiddos, like when else, right? Um,
Yep.
and so I've here I am in my office. I get up, I go to work early because I need quiet space. I kind of have my own rituals. The wh- I've started to allow myself, a couple days where basically I've started to allow myself to completely shut down on weekends and just be present for my kids in the morning, and to see their faces when daddy's here in the morning. It makes me, well, really, it makes me feel horrible for having been absent in so many mornings.
There is such
But
push pull, you know.
yes, but it is, I mean, it means so much to see daddy in the morning.
Yeah.
um yeah, my daughter, she's hilarious. She is hilarious. Just beats the tune of her own drum. She calls it like she sees it. And anytime, so my rules for myself, I try to put my phone up on the charger as soon as I get home, and I give it one check right after the kids go to bed. But I don't have it out. I try to remove myself anytime I'm looking at email or on my phone. My daughter almost just as if she knows who I want to be. She's like, "Daddy, stop looking at your phone." Like, okay, I mean, it's embarrassing to me, but she wants my attention.
I love that you bring that up. So when my kids were young, we didn't have the cell phones quite the way that we do today. But I can remember one morning, I was trying to make breakfast and I had my computer up and I was trying to like type some sort of email. And my son came in and he asked me a question. He was probably 3 or 4 and he had some question for me, which I don't even remember what it was now, but I was like, what, what? And breakfast. And he says, Mom, can you please stop the computer? And I was like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? I have a person here in front of me. And I would think of that now as managing my energy drains. Like I would know to not do that. But like you, I always say that I'm notoriously unreliable. Like it is unlikely that I will see your text message or your email or your whatever.
Sure.
With very few exceptions, I've got like some people on my phone that are, that override the do not disturb function.
Sure.
I mean, I've got teenagers now, so that matters. Gosh, there's so many directions I want to go in, and our time is relatively short. We've got about 10 minutes left. I love that we've been able to talk about some of the book. I get, what I'll ask you, Shane, is where do you, like, I've got all my markings and there was all kinds of stuff that I wanted to sort of talk about. There's one thing that I want to bring up.
Okay.
What I think of as kind of the most important concept. But before we get there, is there anything that's come up for you in our conversation? Is there anything that you want to, oh, no, you know what? There was one thing that I wanted to remember to say. So a couple minutes ago, I did say that adults need to be held as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's so true. I wanted to make sure that I put in a caveat and say that I think it's really important for us grown-ups to not ask our kids to take that responsibility.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is boundaries, and I think they're essential. And any dysfunctional relationship I've ever seen, there's a mismanagement of boundaries. People, it's people. So it's different when you have kids, and this is something I had to learn. But it's people taking responsibility for other people's emotions.
Yes.
And so there tends to be a dynamic where some people expect others to take responsibility for their emotions, and that's dysfunctional. And they tend to attract people who want to be needed, so they tend to take responsibility for other people's emotions. And that interplay, I think, is I think one thing I comment on is that too many parents have done that. That there's a situation now where there's I don't know if you want to call it a spiritual need or emotional need. There's a need going unmet in society, a need for purpose, and a lot of parents are finding that in their kids, and it's not to their own children's benefit, and they're creating neediness because they want to be needed, and I think that is it's worth noting for sure.
Relating that back to your idea of you discovered that other people shared your anxiety disorder.
Yes.
A little bit of a crutch.
Yes.
You can say, well, here's my asterisk. Here's this reason why I can't fulfill this. Here's this reason why, like, it's okay because it's this thing. And,
sure.
And
sure. Well, that's a whole can of worms. If I
over our last 10 minutes.
Well, I've just seen this over and over with how we're parenting kids. One of the things that I outlined in the first chapter is really the state of emotional and physical health for our kids is it's an inflection point. It should make us all pause and say, okay, we need to do something different. And a common approach, I think. So we're all, especially post-COVID, we're becoming a lot more aware of the mental health disorders. Although I was particular in not changing the statistics. I wanted all my statistics that I put in the first chapter to be prior to COVID.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it's like this ain't new. It's getting worse because of COVID, but it's not new, and I think that's important to note.
And COVID is, you know,
It's an
it's
exacerbating factor.
it is, but it will pass. I mean, I always think
Yeah.
like we had never heard, we didn't have to pay attention to the 1918
Spanish
flu
flu.
outbreak, right? Until the pandemic happened for us, and then we're learning that they coined the term social distancing, like different things that work.
Sure.
And anyway, yeah. So go keep going.
Well, so the the idea that I see a lot now that socio-emotional learning has become kind of a buzzword on high school campuses, and we're all aware that this stuff is important now, but the tendency, I think, is to create a crutch in people, to create this sense to the rather than say, I empathize, I understand, I meet you there, and I know you can work through this, you can do this, I'm going to support you. Rather than that, I think the tendency is to for a lot of people, it's kind of what I call kindness 1.0, is to take away any sort of standard or expectation or any sort of to basically lower the bar for them because they're going through something challenging. And I find that to be infantilizing and really a veiled form of cruelty, because it holds people back. It allows them to fall either even further behind, and empowers them to always point to their crutch rather than saying, all right, crutches are going to happen, you can overcome this.
Yeah. So my one of my kids has all of his life he's had a challenge with one of his feet. He had surgery on it on his leg when he was 5. He this particular leg is shorter than the other leg, and when he was all of his life, we would go and see the doctor, and the doctor would say, well, when he gets to a point where it looks like he's almost done with his growth, we can do something about this. Like we'll be able to do something about this. So we get to that point when he was about 15, 16, something like that. And we went to the doctor, and the doctor asked him, how do you feel about this? Like, I'm comfortable if you want to not operate, and I am comfortable if you want to operate. And my son got into his snowboarding stance, and he said, actually, I think this helps me. Like,
love it.
He's such an athlete. And he has one leg that's shorter than the other. Like,
sure.
Okay, but if we had handled that differently, if we had said, don't do anything, don't do any sports, because problem, right? Instead, thank goodness we had. I mean, the doctors at Children's Hospital were essential in this, because they didn't ask us, they asked him from the time that he went there. When I suppose when he was 5, probably they were talking to us more than they were talking to him. But as soon as they felt, and this was within just a few years of that, once they felt his opinions were more important than ours, we were the reference people, not the people in charge of this doctor's appointment.
That's beautiful.
It is. It's amazing. And for a long time, what I really just felt was the power of them showing up for him in this way. And now our other son has a health problem or health challenge that has required Children's Hospital's help for years. And again, it's amazing. Like they're helping him understand that he's in control of his health and his life, and the decisions that he makes are the important decisions. What does he want to happen? How can they help him do what he wants to do? And it's the opposite of what you were saying.
Yeah. He's empowered to become his own person and his own decision maker.
You know what I think is really cool about this too, Shane, is that before you wrote this book, before you had children, right, you learned this lesson yourself. Like, I think before I thought deeply on play and ceding responsibility, ceding control, giving up control in order to like have a more present, playful experience of life, I had to go through the challenges that I've gone through to get there as well, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's and it reminds me of this kind of goes back, but it reminds me of the I think it's the Zen Buddhist story, the two arrows. Um, uh, the first arrow is what happens to you, and the second arrow is you inflicting what you inflict on yourself because you obsess on it. If you approach even the worst challenge in a present flow, almost playful manner, uh, then yeah, it can be that springboard. It can be, you can look back and say, my goodness, thank goodness.
I now see this tendon disorder. I needed a wheelchair when I left the house for more than a year. I lost the ability to walk more than a few steps. I spent 8 months like that, and then I spent the next 18 months regaining that ability.
And that would really, I can only imagine, because like you said, action, physical movement, those things produce emotions that you want,
what got me back, one of my goal, like my real North Star goal, was to be able to ski.
Uh-huh.
So the day that I was able to get out on a ski hill it happened to be with my dad and my brother. After not being able to do that, and to stand at the top of a and see the view and know that like you can do this, was just one of the most empowering feelings. And I never would have had that if I hadn't had the challenge,
Yeah, absolutely.
First place.
So my thought there is, these stories, and every impressive person I've ever talked to has stories like this. And I can't imagine being in your situation, being in a wheelchair for that long, I think it's unbelievable that you worked to that point. Our children need these opportunities too.
Yeah.
They need these opportunities to have lows and to work through them, to know that they can, because they will again when they become adults. And I feel like this is something that is really important to internalize as a parent, because I can already feel the shift in myself when your babies are hurt and you just want to do whatever you can to fix it. At a certain point, though, that you have to wean yourself off, I guess. It's so empowering to have worked through something like that, to have been at a really low point, and then to see, wow, I would have never thought I'd be back here. It felt so low. And so, obviously you want to support people and love them there. But I think it's really important to give children the opportunity to build the ability to do just that.
Yeah. And that brings me to where kind of where I wanted to wrap up. I'd never read this quote from Steve Jobs before, and I don't know if you can see that, I circled it and I also put a heart. Like, this really mattered to me, this particular quote. Steve Jobs says, and you have this in the chapter called The Transition to Adulthood.
Yeah.
Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking that you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart.
Yeah. That's from a commencement address he gave at Stanford. And if anyone has an extra 15 minutes today, I recommend going and watching that. It's maybe the most inspiring commencement address I've ever seen. Really wonderful.
I'm going to link to it. I'm taking a note so I
can. Yeah, cool.
Link to it in the show notes. Yeah. So I actually am going to put that quote on I have a board in our kitchen that the one that it says right now is it's a David Ben-Gurion quote about miracles. I believe it is, anyone who doesn't believe in miracles is not a realist. I think this quote from Steve Jobs is the one that's going to replace it, because I mean, they're both important, right? But
Yeah.
we do feel like we have so much to lose. So much is at stake. And it's not a helpful way to think, right?
No. Oh, absolutely. And it sounds morbid, but uh, I think everyone is of course afraid to die. But I think it's really important to spend some time actually thinking on, because I mean, I know I remember watching that for the first time and stopping and thinking, and it's so true. I've heard it, and I referenced my good friend who died in that same chapter, and it's really hit me across the head a few times. But it's an amazing thing to stop and think, like, this is all I got, and it's a wonderful thing, and I want what do I want my life to have been? How do I want to? You can look at it as a terrifying and terrible thing that you're going to die, or like every day's a gift.
Yeah.
Like, this is so special. I have the opportunity to be here now. This is my life. Don't waste it. This is my life. Who do I want to be? Because I have precious time here,
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's morbid or what, but I think of death as a very inspiring thing.
And I don't think I would put it in that exact same way that I think of death as a very inspiring thing. I do understand, and not to say that that's a wrong way to
Sure.
think. It's just I more think about, like, I love and I know that there's an asterisk in even mentioning the name J.K. Rowling. However,
Sure.
I still go back and I will read Harry Potter and go back and find things that shape my life. And I won't get into the asterisk anymore. I find that incredibly frustrating that this anyway, okay, not going there.
Harry Potter was the most. I grew up with Harry Potter. He was my age at every step of the way. It was the neatest thing that ever happened. So yeah, no apologies here necessary.
Yeah, I like, for a while I went through this period of like, is it even okay to resonate with anything that the woman who is now, I fundamentally disagree with her on this important thing. Like, is it okay? Anyway, and I've decided that it is okay, which is why I will bring this up. But there's a point at which Dumbledore says, to the well-trained mind, death is but the next great adventure.
Hmm.
And I do tend to think about the people who are gone from our lives here are still here.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, that was something that, and I mean, when I couldn't walk, when I was in pain, I've had very similar issues with my thumb tendons, which kind of knocked everything offline, which is why I still have the challenges I have today. I felt like such a burden because everything needed to be done for me. I thought I felt dead inside. I mean, I felt like, what's the point of being here? And I think what I try to do with this show and with everything that I do is to help people get to the point of enjoying without having to have that horrible low. We all have our challenges.
Sure. Yeah.
And I do think that I'm coming around, I guess, to thinking that of death as the next great adventure. I really, there's a Buddhist tradition that I don't understand particularly well. I haven't read too much into it, but my understanding is that there's a Buddhist tradition that souls go through lives together, that there's a group of souls that, and I love the idea that maybe I'm a part of a group of souls that go to, maybe I've known my husband and recognized him when I shook his hand because I'd met him before.
Sure. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's well, I think it is important to think about, for just for that, to give yourself a sense of how small you are, and but you're connected to something bigger. I feel like that comes through when we allow ourselves to think about this, and to really think, because because reflection, you talk about your activity where you split the page. Reflection, I think, is what is often missing, and what can be the spark to activity, to those more fulfilling activities. So absolutely, I think that is, death is a cause of reflection for how you're living your life.
Yeah. Wow, that's a beautiful. It's funny because we've gone so deep today.
Well, I'm glad. That's where I like to live.
Oh, me too. Death is a cause of reflection for how you're living your life. Is that? I mean that. I always try to think like, what's going to be the title of this episode? I mean, it's so deep, but it's so, looking at those, really being able to see what's in front of us. I think about, just a few moments ago, I thought of consulting my heart. So sometimes I will now put my hand over my heart and ask, what does my heart need me to know right now?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way of consulting an intuition that isn't your mind, that isn't your thinking brain, but that is more like, there are messages in my body if I'm willing to listen and tune in.
Sure. Well, I think this is having ritual tradition, some sort of, I guess ritual is the better word, in your own life, where you remind yourself of the non-logical, of the and of the that you are a part of a bigger whole.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important. So, there was a stage in my life where I rebelled from religion somewhat, and I've come full circle to where now I really respect it. I think it's important that I think dogmatic, fundamentalist interpretations can be very insidious, but I think a mature, reflective mind can find a lot of inspiration and beauty, and can find rootedness in these traditions. So I think of that when you put your hand over your heart, to stop, and I've started to make myself, before I eat, stop and do gratitude, which is basically, I started to realize I'm praying before I eat. This is what I grew up doing, and I've had to kind of come in the back door to realize this is a really important thing for me to stop and slow myself down and do before I eat.
Yeah, and I think to that point, while not a particularly religious person, I'm a very spiritual person, and part of presence, it feels like to me, is to be able to understand simultaneously that what is in front of me is amazing. Whatever it is, the opportunities that it presents are amazing, even if it's hard to look at, even if it's hard to see and really understand. But I can only get there by very clearly acknowledging this is what I am seeing, and not making up a story about it and not wishing it was some other way. Sometimes that's the hardest thing.
Yes.
That's really where all the joy has come into my life too. And there's a presence to it, and there's a playfulness aspect to it, of like improv. And there's an acceptance to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of a Tony Robbins quote, something to the effect of, when you replace your expectations with appreciation, your whole world changes in an instant. And I've felt that a billion times, when I just shift that lens, instead of wanting and trying to create an outcome, just to realize how unbelievable what I have. It just shifts everything, and you feel a different energy. I've had to do that with the book for a while. I'm preparing for a book release. You get so bogged down. I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to get this. If I don't get this article here, then I won't have these readers. People won't find this. And it's there is a quote from the Bhagavad Gita, actually, and it's let go of the fruits. You're entitled to the work, but not the fruits. And that I just keep thinking that it's like, yes, okay, that's what you got to do. You show up, you do the work, you enjoy the work, and let go of the fruits.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that same idea.
So hard to do, but yet so when you
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
I've been noticing a feeling of lightness, like emotional lightness in me in the last couple of weeks. And I've actually turned to my husband and I will say, like, wow, I'm feeling light right now. Not heavy, but light. And I believe it's come through the work of seeing what's in front of me, asking what lesson it has for me, spending the time like offloading responsibility for things that I can't be responsible for, other people's emotions, other
Sure.
people, other things like that. And really in kind of looking in my heart and saying, like, what do I want right now? Like that idea of camping, solo camping came from one of my coach clients who, I mean, she's got a lot to work out in her life. She's got a little kid. She's a single parent. And yet somehow
Hmm.
she managed to go solo camping more than once and have an incredible experience. And I'm like, well, I mean, if you can do it, I've got no excuse.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit afraid of, like, what would the hours bring? Like, what would it be like to just be by myself? And I loved it. And so I think that I'm working towards kind of maybe a new understanding, but whatever it is, it's a little bit, it's bringing me moments of like, oh, I can actually look around and not worry about a shoe dropping, but instead
Hmm.
enjoying this moment. Well, Shane, oh my gosh, I think we could go on for
Yeah.
such a pleasure. Just a final thought, anything that you wanted to say that to wrap up?
um, I'm nothing comes to mind. It's been such a pleasure to be here, so I really appreciate the opportunity. And my book is out November 9th.
Which
So that's exciting.
that could be pretty close. This, I believe, will be just a few weeks after that. So
Okay, fantastic. Good. Well, then it's out.
it is again, Setting the Bar by Shane Trotter. It's got a great cover, really compelling. And I love, it's one of those covers where the image makes a lot of sense within what's written in the book, and also just you can look at it and go, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Very good.
Good.
Coming on the show, for jumping right in. I mean, we have covered some big things today. I think that's going to be super helpful for our viewers, our listeners.
Well, thank you again. Yeah, it was wonderful. I appreciate it.
And everybody, you can find Shane at trottershane.com. And I do have it over here. I can do my hosting duties properly at inspiredhumandevelopment.com. So those are the two places where you can connect with him. The book, I'm sure, is going to be available, is, when this comes out, available everywhere you find books. Yes.
Yep. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Awesome.
And if there's a place where it's not at, I'll try to find it.
And I always try to end every show, first of all, by thanking you for listening, for watching, for being here with us for this enlightening hour. And also, I always have a special thank you to our producer. He's come up in this conversation before. He is the man without whom I don't know what my life would be like, but it wouldn't be as good as it is. So he's Benjamin Culp, the 24-time winner of the Husband of the Year Award. Thank you so much, Ben, for everything that you do for us. And everybody watching, listening, thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.